Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Star Nations Radio Network on Be Live TV, live streaming on Facebook. This is Denise Iwaniw-Francisco and
Carl and
Ortrun.
Franklin.
And this evening is the premiere of our brand new show, The Mystery School, on Star Nations. And we are so excited to have you all with us this evening. And for those of you that may be logging on right now, if you would do us the kind favor of sharing this broadcast so that others can see that we are live at this time, that would be fantastic. And I'm going to just adjust my screen here for a moment. Very good. And so here we are. It's pretty exciting, Carl and Ortrun.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
It should be fun. Lots of fun.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
You know, as we're getting ready, I'm just going to type in here so people can know who you are as the show's getting rolling. Here we are. Yes. Okay, now people can see who it is that's talking.
Okay.
Hey, Neshi. Hi, Nami. Neshi is checking out the show tonight.
Hi, Neshi.
It's very exciting. You and I, the three of us, have been teaching the Mystery School. We figured it out 10 years now.
Right. It wasn't always named the Mystery School, but we've been teaching for 10 years.
We have. So I thought maybe it would be good for people for the very first time who are checking this out to maybe come to understand how the three of us even met. So Ortrun, Carl, would you talk about that for a moment?
Well, Carl and I, we were both ministers, Coptic ministers at for the Coptic Mystery Schools. We had,
Coptic Fellowship.
well, okay, Coptic Fellowship. And we had designed their ministerial program, the fourth level of programming. Mm-hmm. And Denise, she had come through the ranks, and she came into our class, into our ministerial class. And that's when we got to really know her. And there was just something that we just hit it off. I mean, there was just something right from the start. It seemed like whatever we did together and whatever we chose to do together, it just all fell into place. So here we are, like she said, 9 years later, and we've before at first when we were just going through the classes together, we would have a seasonal seminar, a spiritual seminar for the holy season, which we are going to have again this year on the Saturday following Thanksgiving, which is something we started out with. And then I think it was 5-6 years ago that we ended up choosing to go ahead and change our format and start having the Mystery School.
It was about that long ago, and we've been doing it ever since. And you're right. It was from the moment that we met one another, mm-hmm. There was this wonderful chemistry. Mm-hmm. And an immediate liking for one another. And then it began. And, you know, the three of us met through really the Egyptian, the Coptic mysteries. Right. And I'm hoping that maybe you would talk for just a moment about what was it about the Egyptian mysteries that drew you to them. And I'm going to try to figure out my lighting here for just a moment. Something is off. Okay. So you two talk about that for a moment, and I'll be right back.
I'm not sure about Carl, but I know I'll tell you, I had a real like I was led to it. It was 1972. I had just been divorced for a year, and I didn't know nothing about the Egyptian mystery schools at that particular time. Somewhat I was into metaphysics because my sister-in-law, she had a guru and she did yoga. And so I was always so fascinated by all of it. But this one day I walked into this dime store, 5 and 10, if any of you remember that. And I walked over to their jewelry counter and I looked into their case, and I saw this this cross, and I really did not know what kind of a cross it was, but I looked at it and I thought, oh, everlasting life.
Mm.
So that fascinated me. So I bought this cross and I wore it. I wore it for quite a few years. As I said, this was 71, 72. And Carl and I, we were married in 76. And right away, Coptics picked us up. They wanted us right away to start doing talks together.
That cross was an ankh.
Yes, it was. It was
which
an
is
ankh, right.
The Coptic,
right.
the cross used by the Coptic Christians.
Yes, but I never realized that until I looked at literature, Coptic literature, and it was describing the different levels of learning that they had. And at the ministerial level, it said it had the ankh. So I thought, wow. So I was drawn to this, to Coptics, I believe, so many years previous, not even recognizing it, but wearing that faithfully almost every single day. And then there it was just very, very interesting. And it said light, that's what it was, light ministry is what it said right next to it. So that's how I became fascinated with it. But what about you, Carl?
Well, what year did we go to Egypt?
Well, okay, it wasn't until 1987 that we went to Egypt.
But in Egypt, she was just flipping back into memories, and it didn't touch me because I don't have a background there. But the fact that she was, on one hand, almost felt like she was coming home while we were there. She has really then been immersed in Egypt ever since then. And she's become really an esoteric Egyptologist, in my opinion.
Well, thank you. Well, it's interesting. He says he doesn't remember having any lifetimes there, but I know he has, of course. What was interesting about that trip, and it's just, I think, precious, I have to say, because they were giving away a trip to Egypt at our conference, our Coptic conference. And I was just astounded that I won. But that particular time, someone came to the conference and they were selling papyrus art. And I had never seen any papyrus art before either. And there was one that I was so attracted to. And it actually is the one right above us here. And it's of Akhenaten and his bride. And what I liked so much about it was the balance that I saw in that picture between the two of them in masculine and feminine energies together, working together. And I really wanted it. So Carl bought it for me because my birthday was coming soon. And then, I don't know, I think it was the next day they had the drawing and I won this trip to Egypt.
Wow.
Yes, I know. So here it was, I think it was August. And by November, we went to Egypt. We did not go with the Coptics. We went with someone totally different group. And it was a 2-week road trip. So we were, in and off the bus every single day. We would see someplace and pack back up and go further. But I'm telling you, it's wonderful to have done it that way. We saw, I think, so much more than if you go down the Nile and go to just to the sites.
Right.
So go ahead, Carol.
Well, another interesting point is the picture of Akhenaten behind us that she really was attracted to. Since then, we have learned that she is the oldest child of Akhenaten.
Well, that's something has come through, but it's of Akhenaten, but this is Tutankhamun and his bride behind us.
Oh.
Yeah. Right. So, but Carl didn't want to go to Egypt. Yes, and it was very interesting because usually I would be the one that would be a little bit withdrawn, and he would be the one that was always out, very social. On that particular trip, he was not. I was the one that was very social, and he was withdrawn. And he was actually, what we found out was it was a trip for our relationship. It really was. It was a trip for he to get more in touch with his heart, and for me to get more in touch with the mind. Beautiful. And it was very, very interesting. The experiences that we had along the way with that. We each had our personal experiences. For instance, it's interesting that when we had our time in the Great Pyramid, that the first place I went to, I didn't go down the pit. I didn't go to the Queen's Chamber. I walked over to the Grand Galleria, I stood there and I prepared myself. It's as if I knew how to do the breathing properly so that it would be not such a hard incline for me and so on. And I went up into the King's Chamber. And of course I had the experiences there, like we all, and it is a very steep.
Yes, it is.
I'm going to say up steep. to the King's Chamber. And then, you have to I had to sort of lift myself to go through that opening that wasn't all that large to get in there. And then once in the King's Chamber itself, there's the sarcophagus. And of course, you have the opportunity to lie in that sarcophagus. And there are so many different things that is all about. And at the time that I was experiencing it, I wasn't recognizing how deep the experiences were and what the symbology and what it was all about. In the meantime, Carl, he walks into the Great Pyramid.
And I end up in the Queen's Chamber.
In the Queen's Chamber.
Which is dealing with the heart.
Right.
I never made it to the King's Chamber.
No. And I never made it to the Queen's Chamber. And it was just, we were directed to where it is that we were supposed to be. So it was very, very interesting. That was only one of the incidences throughout the trip.
Okay. Hey, tell us about yourself now.
Yes, Dana.
Well, for myself, I've always been fascinated by ancient teachings and mysteries and the thought of a mystery school and learning about the unseen world. And of course, for me, about the stars, because I've always been fascinated by the stars. And I've known since I was a young girl that Egypt and the stars, the correlation is impeccable. And so as I got older and I was invited to speak at a Coptic event. And I then began to understand the depth of Egyptian mysteries, etc., and ancient teachings in the Coptic teachings. I was drawn into it and into the Coptic Fellowship, which is where I met the both of you and immediately fell in love with the both of you. And began, 4 years of study and learning. But frankly, what I learned more about ancient Egypt was through the both of you. And having traveled twice to Egypt and being there in the soil with the people, in the temples, experiencing the incredible energy. And what I discovered instantaneously is what we hear over here on this side of the pond about antiquity, particularly with religion, is many times very different than what we learn when we go back to the source of Judeo-Christianity, which is right there in Egypt. So whatever trickled or made its way across the pond to the west, in some cases is vastly different than the original happenings and the original journaling or keeping track of whatever you want to say about the writings about it and the teachings about it. So that only makes me dive in deeper to know, well, so we were only told half truths on this side of the pond. And in some case, there's no truth. It's all hyperbole and it's all extrapolation according to what anyone has decided to tell us about the ancient ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for me, the deeper I go, you can't go deep enough. And Carl, you're right. Ortrun is a magnificent esoteric Egyptologist. I think she's a wonderful Egyptologist anyway. But I will say this to everybody who's listening right now. If you want to learn about the esotericism, the esoteric teachings, the ancient teachings of Egypt, Ortrun, in my mind, and I do a lot of reading and a lot of study, as you all know, she's number one. Yeah. And I mean that with all sincerity. Here at Star Nations, we have an absolute hidden jewel in her that I'm hoping that this new show will be able to expose even further for people who really want to know about the Egyptian mysteries in a good way and not in a Hollywood way.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the Egyptian mysteries. In the Coptic Church, there is the formal Orthodox Coptic Christian Church. But underneath that and behind that, there are the Egyptian mystery schools that are associated with the Coptic Orthodox Church. And in the same way that the Roman Catholic Church has their religious orders, so the Coptic Christian Church has the mystery schools. And the information that we're most comfortable dealing with comes from the mystery schools, not from the Coptic Orthodox Church.
Right, but it goes further back. When you truly go into the Egyptian mysteries, it's even deeper than what you get when you attend the Coptic esoteric schools here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's just so much more. And the thing is that so much of it is what you understand. It's when you look at something or read, I'm going to say, for instance, the Bible or a holy book, when you're reading that and you read it once and, oh, okay, if there's something, you get some understanding out of it. And then you go back and you read it again and it has a different meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really what there is also in the esoteric mysteries,
mm-hmm.
is that there's just so much depth there.
Mm-hmm.
That and the only way that you can come to know that is if you truly do take that time. I'm going to say to go within,
mm-hmm.
because that's really where all true learning comes from within.
Right.
Let's face it. We can read all the books we want, but if we don't take it within and see how it feels within us and how it makes us feel as far as the peacefulness and the joy,
mm-hmm.
then it's not real. It's not true. It's false. It has to feel beautiful to you, beautiful and peaceful and joyful to you. And if you get to that point within yourself with what it is that you are a part of, that's when you know you're on the right track.
It has to resonate with you.
Mm-hmm.
And if it does, then it becomes a part of you. If it doesn't resonate with you, then it remains just in the head and out here.
And Carl, he's very, very challenging sometimes because he goes deep, far out. It's hard for many people to understand what he's talking about. But as we say, and
you're saying I'm a master at confusing people.
He can be, but the thing is that file it. We always say file it. If it's something that doesn't really make sense to you, file it. If it feels comfortable, accept it and hold on to it. But if it doesn't, it may make some sense somewhere along the way.
Mm-hmm. We've got lots of people watching us at the moment, and we have some Coptic ministers that are tuned in. Linda Griesiak is tuning in, and Nishi and Willie and Minnie and Kelly and Sonia and Lisa, all checking things out and tuning in this evening about the mystery schools. How long have the mystery schools been around? Hey, Del Marie. Del is in the house. So is Julie and Janice, Julie Hedges. Sandy Moorer is tuning in. Laura Smith is listening. We've got just a wonderful group of people tuning in tonight.
Wonderful.
And because they want to learn about what is a mystery school. We know that there are Greek mystery schools, mm-hmm. French mystery schools. The mystery schools really happen around the world. And this evening, we're talking a little bit more about the Egyptian mystery schools because the three of us have been through the mystery school teachings and training and ordinations and all those wonderful kinds of things. But when we get down to Egypt, there is a belief that Egypt is the motherland, that when this outpost known as Grandmother Earth was going to be inhabited, the first inhabitants, some believe, came to Egypt, and some believe that those first inhabitants were Atlanteans. How do you feel about that?
Well, I know because I know it in my heart that the Atlanteans were the ones to come onto Egypt, and they were the ones that built the pyramids, the first pyramids, which was Saqqara. I know that. And I know also that part of that was also the Lemurians, because they're also mixed in with that. As far as the first ones to inhabit Egypt, Egypt has been around for like 700 million years.
Huh?
And now if it was the ones that started Egypt were the Atlanteans, they're said to only have been here about 10,000 years ago or 12,000 years ago. So that doesn't jive. So there were things going on before that, even before that. So it's just that. Go ahead, Carl. You were going to say something.
No, I want to change it. I want to back up to what you were saying previously about all of the churches or religions that have their inner teachings. Mm-hmm. And I want to mention one significant group in this country that does not have mystery teachings, that does not go back, and that's the Protestants.
Well,
they don't. They're in terms of inner teachings. They only go by what's in the Bible and from their level of consciousness. So the way I read the Bible is at a much different level than they read it, and thus coming to different interpretations. And to me, the important verses in the Bible are largely ignored by them, and the ones that they take very seriously, I have different meanings for.
Okay.
But that's because you're the student, and that's because you are delving within. And
well, the interpretation comes from our level of consciousness.
Right.
That's all that we can do.
Right.
And most people don't want to have to figure it out for themselves. They simply accept what others are saying about it, and that comes from then their level of consciousness.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted you.
Well, that's okay. But so there was much going on already in Egypt before the Atlanteans even came. The reason why the Atlanteans came to Egypt is because at the time that their land masses were going under, they were losing their land. They wanted
going under the water.
Yes, they were sinking, and so they wanted to take their teachings, the mystery school teachings of Lemuria also, because some of the Lemurians had moved into the Atlantic area when their land masses fell. So there was a combination, and they wanted to bring and keep those teachings on the planet. Mm-hmm. So they chose to bring those teachings into Egypt. And the Egyptologist, Aquin Fayed, he's not alive anymore, but we met him on our trip, and then he became the Coptic Egyptologist.
Right.
He told us that if you looked at a map,
an aerial photograph
of
satellite photograph,
yes, of
northern Africa,
ancient Africa, there was a dry bed that led right to the where Saqqara was built. So it shows that they could have come in from
the Atlantic
Ocean and by river. And also, there are many pictures I've seen where there's water all around the pyramids. Uh-huh. So there have been times when that was all water.
Exactly.
So
where do you believe that the Atlanteans and the Lemurians, if they're the first occupants of the motherland that we call Africa or Egypt, where do you believe that they came from? What is their origin?
Well, there were two continents, the Lemurian continent and the Atlantean continent. The Lemurians were a highly evolved people spiritually, and they were extraordinarily peaceful. We would liken them today to what we call the crystal children. They were pure love. And they would not even, they were so peaceful, they wouldn't even defend themselves. Well, the Atlanteans, on the other hand, were more like what we call the indigo children. They were more technologically advanced, but not as spiritually advanced. And for some reason, perhaps they had rulers that were interested in conquest. They were going to attack Lemuria. And the Lemurians, instead of standing and fight, because that just wasn't their nature, they had enough of them that were already sixth-dimensional in consciousness that they were able to create, I'm going to call them tunnels, into what we call the inner earth. And all of the Lemurians basically went with them to inner earth, along with some of the more highly evolved and peaceful Atlanteans. So that's where they came from. The rest of the Atlanteans later on, when their continent began to sink, a lot of they spread throughout the world. We know that a lot of them went to South America because of the number of pyramids there. And they also, probably the biggest concentration went to what is now Egypt.
But see, the times were different. If you look at the dates of the Mayan comparison to Egypt, they're different because, again, it very much could have done with when their land masses are falling, and so they were going different directions at different times, finding places where they could ground their energies again.
Do you believe that they came here to both of those continents from the stars?
Yes, that's what I was going to say. That's where I think that the Lemurians and the Atlanteans came from. And the Lemurians, they were more in the Pacific area and more Australia and New Zealand. And I'm going to say even into the Philippines and so on, that whole area. That was all the Lemurian land.
And some people believe the island of Kauai as well.
Yes.
Yes, that's the northern part of what was it, Lemuria, yes.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about that, the land mass fell, because we hear about the fall of Atlantis, the fall of Lemuria, we can understand then that the fall is actually land mass being covered by water, and Lemurians and Atlanteans having to integrate into different societies, bringing their teachings into other societies.
Yes. Mm-hmm. But they wanted to, when they wanted to bring their teaching into societies, they wanted to bring it into places that were balanced and peaceful. And that's the reason why it was brought to Egypt, because at the time that it was brought to Egypt, it happened that Upper and Lower Egypt were very much in balance. That Osiris and Seth, they were the kings, that they were in harmony. And so that is why they ended up coming there. And that is where they built the pyramids, their different initiatory chambers, because there are many, and actually the great pyramid, or the plateau of Giza, is part of that Saqqara complex also. It started off small because that's the first that was built, but then it was expanded and it was made larger, but it's all basically the same complex. And they did have, and still do, we don't know where they are, but there are certainly chambers and so on that lead back and forth from those two complexes.
Absolutely. And the chambers that run from the Sphinx into the Great Pyramid. When I've been in Egypt twice now, I've made the descent into the pit of the Great Pyramid. Did the both of you do that as well?
We did not. That's what's so interesting. And I believe, this is my personal feeling, is I believe you go where you're meant to go.
Yes.
And for us, it was different. Like I said, I went up to the king's chamber and he went into the queen's chamber. And that was not something that we were to be experiencing that particular time. Right. And that doesn't mean that we haven't been there, because in the mystery school, there's so much that goes on within you, and in the sleep state and in the meditative state, that even though you weren't there physically, you still have the same kind of experience as being there physically by going into the pit or going into the queen's chamber or the king's chamber, because because all those places are very, very symbolic.
They are.
And the pit basically is walking down into that darker aspect of ourselves and looking at the dark night of the soul, just very quickly covering it in that manner. And the queen's chamber moves you up into the heart center. So you have to clear out that all the gunk by going into the pit. And if that is cleared out, maybe that's why we didn't have to go to the pit. Maybe we were ready to go to those different places. So before you can actually go on to the queen's chamber and onto the king's chamber. So, but
it's a process.
Yes, it's a process. But I also know that much of that occurs even when you're not there physically. I know even Hamad Bey having, hearing about Hamid Bey having experienced his initiation in the king's chamber, and he was not living there anymore.
Right. So. Well, and when we begin to talk about the Merkaba light body, and how it pertains to the Great Pyramid. For me, we had ceremony, high sacred ceremony in the King's Chamber. And Julie Hedges, you'll appreciate this because it is the cycle. And so all of us being first in the Queen's Chamber, into the heart, and then going up into the King's Chamber, where each one of us took a turn lying in the sarcophagus of initiation and hearing our friends chanting our name, almost like a Gregorian chant in the King's Chamber, aligning you under, of course, the belt of Orion, and in the resonance of your own birth name. And after that, the pinnacle point there being in the King's Chamber, we then went down into the pit of the Great Pyramid, which reminds us that the process begins again, that there are always things to die to in order to be, for lack of a better way of putting it, to be born again or to begin again, to begin anew. So the Egyptian teachings, the Merkaba teachings, are about this magnificent cycle of life, the wheel. And as they say, the Sphinx is the watcher on the threshold. The Sphinx is right there in front of the Great Pyramid. And as Ortrun, as you were saying, those initiates and adepts that are ready are allowed over the threshold and brought to the place within their learning in their own interior pyramidal system or interior castle as they need to be, or as the lessons are being prepared for them, and they are prepared for the lessons being presented. So sometimes we have these amazing expectations of our spiritual journey, but when we go with the flow of it and understand we're always where we need to be at any given time along the path of the initiate, of the adept, of the master, we're always where we're supposed to be. And that not only includes the pyramidal complex there on the Giza Plateau, but I was hoping that the both of you would also talk about the temples along the Nile. I believe that most people in healing work, at least in the West, understand that the right side of our body is predominantly male and the will, and the left side of our body is the divine feminine and the intuitive, etc., etc. And so when we're talking about the temple complexes along the Nile River, this is also very true in the way they were created and placed along the Nile, which some consider to be the spine of the motherland. Can we talk about that? Because that's pretty basic knowledge that ties into the way that the ancient Egyptians even created their landmarks and sacred ceremonial places.
Yes, that what you said is absolutely true. And the right side, as you said, is the masculine side. And if you were looking at Egypt, because of our being in the northern hemisphere, when we look at Egypt, Upper Egypt is actually, it looks like it's south, and Lower Egypt is actually to the north. And each one of these different pyramids, or it's not, they're not pyramids, but the different sacred places, they all represent a part of us. They represent our chakra system. And there are actually 12 masculine chakras and 12 feminine chakras. Some of the majors, the 7 major and the 7 minor. And by going on the east side, we are in that creative side. That's when you're born into the earth again. You mentioned that basically it's like reincarnation. You're recycling in a sense, because it again starts over. Now you've come to a place of initiation. You've been lifted up to another level of awareness and consciousness, and now you know more. You've learned more because you've been in the darkness of the west side. and or the feminine side or the moon side,
Right.
and you're born into the east side of which is the creative. That's bringing it now back into the world, bringing your teachings back into the world, and then you travel up the Nile. I mean, excuse me, you're traveling actually. You're traveling down the Nile because you came to the to Upper Egypt, which is the highest essence, and then you're learning, growing, becoming, and when you reach again the northern part of the Nile, which is Lower Egypt, then don't stop there, because what happens is that's where the river flows now into the Mediterranean. So that's another aspect of the teachings, is that yes, you can just stay in this one part and go up the one side and then go into the death process and cycle and then repeat. But there's a point in time where you start to reach out. And that's what that delta, the Nile Delta represents. So when you're in northern Egypt, you are still here upon the earth plane, and then you reach out because the waters then now begin to flow out into the world, and it encapsulates the entire planet, because we are here for that purpose, to encapsulate that planet with divine radiant light and love and to uplift it. So that is our purpose. And so then, of course, it can encircle the planet and then comes back in, and there you are again. And you go into the to the west side, which is that inner self, and the different temples on that side represent the inner teachings. But in our daily life, we want to connect every night or every day with that inner aspect of ourselves, so that we can be refreshed, so that we can bring new ideas and bring the higher teachings, because we're learning every second.
Absolutely.
There are parts of us, our cells are dying and being regenerated, and it's that same process. That's what Egypt represents. Is okay, you're going through the cycle, and you're now into the night cycle. Daylight, nighttime, daylight, nighttime, but it's on a much larger scale, because it's not the minute level of the cellular, but it becomes larger and larger. And then you are growing by being uplifted into these different dimensions of awareness and consciousness, which connect you, of course, to the stars. Okay, Carl, add to that?
No.
Well, we're talking about something that's very ancient, and yet we know that we're in this magnificent time of growth in consciousness, as Aquarius is really beginning to kind of sort of take root here. Carl, even though we're talking about ancient Atlanteans, Lemurian teachings, how does it apply to where we are right now and where we are going as the species occupying Grandmother Earth right now?
Well, the Earth, in my opinion, and everything on the Earth is going through an ascension process. And the Earth itself, and the ascension is moving from a level of consciousness, a frequency, to a higher level of consciousness and a higher frequency. We know, for example, that the Earth was pretty steady at 7.8 hertz. That's the frequency of the electromagnetic field that emanates from the planet and reaches out hundreds of thousands of miles and literally protects the Earth. Well, that frequency in 1987 began to increase. And this year, in February, for 3 days in a row, that frequency was at 33 hertz, up from 7.8.
Wow.
And it's a couple of times since then, it's gone much, much higher. So the Earth is evolving, and we believe now, and based on channeled information, that the Earth recently has gone through the fourth dimension and is now entering the fifth dimensional level of the frequency. And the human race is just at the point of crossing, leaving the third dimension and moving into the fourth. And this is bringing about tremendous changes in humanity.
Right.
Would you believe our DNA is changing? And in fact, based on working with over 25,000 children every Christmas as Santa, and this is confirmed by other Santas and other people that work with, a whole county school system of children. We're all in agreement that it's now a majority of the children that we're working with that have advanced DNA, which means they have come from not the earth, but they've come from the stars. They've come from the angelic realm. They've come from the spirit realm. They've come from literally all over creation.
Right.
So we are changing.
Yes.
And if you look at yourself, how much have you changed in the last 10, 15, 20 years?
A lot.
And in working with over 3,000 people and doing live script readings, the first question we asked before you took on human form, what were you? Mm-hmm. And light workers, none of them evolved here on the planet. We've all come from higher dimensions to be here to help the planet and the earth ascend. And the amount of time that these light workers 15, 20 years ago were spending in the third dimensional level of consciousness, it was roughly 1/3 of their time. And now it's less than half of that.
Right.
And the amount of time they were spending in the fifth dimensional level of consciousness, it was in single digits. And now it's between 30 and 40% of their awake time. And they're still functioning roughly 50% of their time in the fourth dimension, which for us is a dimension of transition. So we are growing at an absolutely unprecedented rate of speed. And we are becoming who we have the potential of being. And something else that we've discovered in the last couple of years, as we grow in consciousness, we are changing our DNA. We are activating more what they call codons. And we know people that have activated at least 2 more codons. And the number of active codons determines what your potential is. So when you maximize the potential that you have, then another codon opens, so you have your potential is raised. And this is happening right now as we speak. And the rate of speed at which it's happening is speeding up.
Julie Hedges has a question for you, Carl. And Kelly Spencer is saying, this is so fascinating. But Julie is saying, why haven't we heard about the 33 hertz? Is this part of the mystery school or only for adepts? Why is this not common knowledge, Carl?
The institutions that we have on the planet are all created by humans. And when they were created, humans were basically all third dimensional. So we've got third dimensional institutions, and the third dimension is based on fear and on limitation and on separation. If they know, they don't want us to know, because it makes them out of date. And it's going to cause us to want something greater and better than what they can provide.
So where do we get this information about the 33 hertz? Where does that come from?
I get a lot of my information from being in a meditative state and asking questions, and listening then to what my spirit family or others are sharing with me. I also get a lot from reading other channeled information, but in doing that, I need to be, you have to be discerning. And then by talking to people like you and my wife, okay, and other light workers.
But we've seen some charts too.
Yes, there's a lot of published information now. I read channel. I spend a couple hours a day on the computer reading, and it's basically all channeled information. So if you get on websites that speak to you.
So there are various ones that will speak about the different levels of resonance. But I know I saw a chart just recently that actually showed it spiked like to 70. It was very,
the frequency of the earth.
Well, I think it was the resonance.
Yeah,
Yes,
they call it the
right.
Schumann resonance.
Right.
Yeah. I know that there are published works about this as well. Todd
Yes.
does a lot of voracious reading about this subject. And, he has a very scientific mind.
Yes.
So he likes to see the empirical evidence of all of those things. So there are published works out there, Julie. And if you want to know more, you can connect with Todd, because Todd has some great titles and books that he reads with regard to that very same thing. So science is catching up with what metaphysicians have known for a good long time. And
I tend to think, Dana, though, that these spikes, when spikes occur, I think that's when there is so much energy that's being poured down upon us from the heavens. And so but we can't, as third dimensional beings, that you can't have that type of energy vibration for too long. So that's why it's such a short time span that it's there. It spikes, it's there for a day or two, and then it drops down, or it's there and then it just tapers down slowly. So
right.
I want to modify what you just said.
Sure.
We have more and more people on the earth that are no longer third dimensional beings. And I would say the vast majority of light workers that are awakened are functioning far more in the fifth dimension.
Yes.
And in fact, they're spending roughly 80 to 90% of their time in the fourth and fifth dimensions. And they're the ones that are able to ground this higher frequency energy into the earth. And it's important that they keep their chakras and energy centers open, because it comes in through their crown chakra and traverses through their body and goes out their feet into the earth, as well as in the process radiating out through their aura. And it's influencing them, what they think, feel, say, and do. So then they're spreading it out, and they're part of it is affecting the collective human consciousness.
Yes.
Okay, and as we have more and more light workers coming into the world and awakening, more of this is being grounded. Now, because our physical bodies have to adjust to this higher frequency, at times there are what they call ascension symptoms. So, but know that they're temporary, and there is not a medical cause, and there is not a medical solution.
One of the things that we see is a common thread throughout all mystery schools. And in our series here on Star Nations, we'll be covering not only the Egyptian mystery school teachings that we're, pretty well versed about, I would have to say, especially Ortrun, but we're going to go through, various mystery schools. And I believe that one of the keys in any of the mystery schools, whether it's Egyptian or Eleusinian, any of those, is meditation and contemplation, quiet time. And I think particularly in this time we're living, that to have some quiet, contemplative, meditative time is so important. And we're already almost at the top of the hour, believe it or not. This hour has gone so fast. I was hoping we could spend just a couple of minutes talking about why meditation, contemplation, prayer time, reflective time is a common thread throughout all mystery school teachings. Ortrun.
Well, the reason for this is, as I had mentioned it a little bit earlier, is that all true learning comes from within. And if we are always focused on the outer, you're not going to be able to learn that which is the truth for you. Because we are ourselves, we are that mystery. And in order for us to start understanding ourselves and who it is that we truly are, it is we need to focus within, to slow down. If you were always out there running around and our mind is going so fast, you can't ever think beyond the outer. And so meditation is a process of going within, and meditation, I call it is to educe. It's to bring forth from within, and the word education actually comes from educe, because all true learning does come from within. So that's why it's so important to take that time, to take that rest. And especially if you are on a spiritual journey, if you want to grow spiritually, so that you can connect and recognize how much more there is to you, that you are so much more than what you actually recognize that you are. Mm-hmm. And so that was the very first thing that I focused on, was meditation, because it's so strong and important.
Now, Dana, do we have an hour or an hour and a half?
We have an hour.
An hour. Okay.
1 hour. Okay.
Just a couple of my closing comments would be then, our conscious mind, which is a very small part of our mind, it's inundated with information coming in through the five senses, which information, it's all out there. Whereas in meditation, we're working out of our conscious and subconscious together. And our subconscious is that part of the mind that can go within, not only within, but that can reach out and communicate with the entire spirit realm and the higher dimensions. So it's from that level that we're going to be getting our real learnings.
Fantastic. Julie Hedges has another question, and Kelly Spencer is backing her up. And let me just find this comment very quickly. Would you do a whole show about ascension symptoms and changes, please?
We could do that, yes. I think. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Okay, there you go. Ask and you shall receive.
That's right.
Okay, and Kelly Spencer is saying, I believe this format is a huge leap for this show. For me, the ability to focus on your faces as well helps me a great deal. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
But you didn't tell us how beautiful and handsome we were. I'm disappointed.
I think she's saying that.
Oh, okay. I guess I'm misinterpreting.
One of the other things that I've been thinking about and really talking about as well is the necessity when we're entering into our body or entering into a contemplative time is having conscious breath and breathing. And the three of us experienced this in our Coptic training, is the healing and the ability to go beyond the veil of physicality with conscious breath and certain cadences of breath and techniques. Yes. We all were taught them, and we've all taught them from the Essene or the Egyptian pantheon of breathing techniques. And so I believe that along with the meditation, it's very important sometimes even to just stop and consciously take a deep breath and exhale. How do you feel about that, you two?
Totally agree. Totally agree.
And a personal goal of mine is to be able to live the majority of my waking time in what I'm going to call a light level of meditation, a light level of the alpha state, instead of brainwaves racing at 22 per second to get it down around 12, 13, 14, 15, where you're on the cusp of being in meditation, so that at will you can flip from the conscious to the subconscious, and or be working out of them together. That way you're more subject to receive at any time, any place.
Well, I believe that meditation is a way of life. Personally, that was my very first focus when I started the mystery school, was to focus on meditation, because I believe that it is a way of life. And it's exactly what Carl says, is that you are in that state, because the more that you meditate and the more peaceful state you are anyhow, even though you are focusing on the outer. And if you get out of sorts, it's much easier to come back in to being in that peaceful state. And if you are in that state, you're always aligned then, and you're always connected to that divine spirit, or the angels or the guides or the masters, whoever it is that you are associated with, or you focus on being with. You're always there, and you're always learning. They're your friends. I'm telling you, Dana, you've experienced this ever since you were a child, because you were able to see little ones and so on.
Yeah.
I'm not a seer as much, but I'm a feeler. But you can feel it. You can feel them being there. And I know that you walked into the kitchen one day and you said to me, "Are you talking to yourself, Ortrun?" And I'm thinking, yes, I am.
I did ask you.
I feel like I'm right there with me, and I'm talking to my guides.
Yeah.
And sometimes it probably does look like my mouth is moving or something.
That's great. Well, even when I'm with the horses and I can feel the horses are uptight, I connect with my horses hands on and I take a deep breath and exhale. And pretty soon they're taking a deep breath and they're exhaling. So conscious breathing. When all else fails, stop and take a deep breath. So maybe on the next show, when we're talking about the ascension symptoms and all of these wonderful things going on, we can talk about, why in the Egyptian mystery schools we're taught that we should meditate on a wool blanket. And what are the healing properties of being on a wool blanket? All of those wonderful things that we were taught in our years of training. And so thank you, Julie and Kelly and Janice, for the suggestion that we talk about that next time. But right now it's time for us to wrap it up and wish you all a beautiful evening. Next up, through Star Nation's live stream on Facebook via Be Live TV, it is Neshi, Donna, and Minnie Kansman with the Spirit of Color and the Color of Regalia this evening. So the three of us are going to sign off and thank you all so much for joining us until this time next month. And for those of you in the Grand Rapids area, we do this class once a month at Carl and Ortrun's home in Grand Rapids. And next Thursday evening, we will be gathering at their home for the Mystery School, as we have been for almost 10 years now.
Yeah, 6:30 p.m.
Yes. Looking forward to seeing you there.
Yes.
And thank you all. It was wonderful for us, and you become a community when you're part of these classes.
Yes. Good night, everyone. Blessings be.
Good night, and thank you for tuning in.